For those of you who are regular attenders of our meetings, welcome. For those who come now and again, welcome. And for those who've come for the first time, welcome. You are all equally welcome. This, after all, is Grantown's society, not reserved for any particular group of people. Tonight is, it's obviously very special. It's our first meeting of 2023, so a good New Year to one and all. And our topic is, well, it's got a question mark. So there's a question at the end of this. You can take notes if you like, or not, as the case may be. We do record the meetings, which is something I wish we'd been doing for the last 50 years, because the amount of information that's come through the society and gradually been lost because we haven't been able to hold on to it. But fortunately, we've now got Dave here who's recording it. So anyone who says, whatever you do, don't put me on camera because I shouldn't be here. I'm supposed to be somewhere else. Well, you better let us know. Other than that, we do, after a little while, put the recordings onto our website, so that those who can't manage to come, and indeed we've got members across the whole of the UK, they can actually see more or less what we're doing. However, this presentation, it's an initial exploration of the area we know as Ballintomb, and a look at its relative importance as a historic site. And there we have it. It's that area of Strathspey formed by the triangle between the Dullin and the Spey, below the slopes of Lagan Hill and adjacent to the lands of Inverallen and Gaich. It includes the moor, the moss and the wood of Ballintomb, and a prominent ridge running southwest to northeast, known as Tomlacar. It's largely fertile agricultural land representing the floodplain of the Spey. And what I should say at this point is, this is the story according to the best I've got, but I know that there's a lot more knowledge in this room, so feel free to share it, because we can always add to what we know or correct what we think we know. Well, what's the name? Through time, there have been several versions of the name and its spellings. On Roy's map there, it's described as Wester Ballintomb, and interestingly, Ballintomb is across the river by Achernach and Revach. The generally accepted origin of the name is the home or farmstead of the knoll or mound from Ballintomb. And someone can keep me right on the Gaelic pronunciations as well, please. Historically, there's some confusion with Ballintomb and Speyside. This moor of Ballintomb was the site of Sir Archibald Grant's 1760 planned town of Archiston, initiated just a few years before the foundation of Grantown. And that's their advertisement, which was similar to the one Grantown had. We've described the site as one of the, if not the, most important site in Strathspey after Grantown. Now, what's the justification for this, and what's the evidence? It's been a site of human habitation activity from back in the mists of time. It's traversed by various communication routes of huge importance in their day, and it's farms and fairs. It's a meeting place of the clan and a unique event in clan history. It's a site of ancient courts and gallows, source of stories, agriculture improvements, and had for many years its own distillery. This presentation goes a little way to exploring this claim. As there have been no thorough archaeological surveys of this area, and as there are, of course, no oral traditions or written records of those far-off times, we make deductions of its early story from the evidence of the stones themselves. And of that, there's ample evidence to realise that this must have been an important site, attractive to early peoples. This lack of research makes dating difficult, even within the accepted broad classifications of Neolithic, which in Britain is 4000 to 2000 BC, and the Bronze Age 2000 to 500 BC. Near the south side of Gatewood, overlooking the fields below, and at a short distance from Croftskellich, is a large cairn of stones, which was opened around 1865, when a cist containing dust or ashes was found near its centre. Most of it has been removed to build walls around the adjoining fields. It comprises of a central chamber enclosed within a cairn that measured some 22 by 18 metres, with a spread of rubble a little more than 0.3 metres in height. There's a probable kerbstone on the south-southeast and several low scarps within the rubble, providing evidence for periods of quarrying. The chamber measures at least 1.8 by 1.1 metres and comprises a massive 4-metre block of stone and 2 large slabs. One end is no longer evident, and the chamber is now choked with stones and, to a certain extent, modern rubbish. Further into the wood, another monument can be found. The chamber, or what was the chamber, is a short distance north of the croft. Sadly, most of the once substantial cairn has gone. All that remains is one kerb and clumps of rubble. To make matters worse, this beautiful site too has been used as a mini rubbish dump. And there are other sites further up the hill overlooking Cragan and the new distillery. Most distinctive, however, are the standing stones situated at the southwest end of the glacial ridge called Tom Carach, Hillock of the Pillars. Here are 6 stones, 3 of which are still upright. Again, without full archaeological exploration, dating is difficult. Several describe the stones as Bronze Age, although one has cut marks which suggest older Neolithic origins. The layout of the site could indicate a positive interest in the rising sun at the summer and winter solstice. The site also shows an interest in the setting sun at the 2 winter cross quarter days, which is the 4th of February and around the 7th of November. Further evidence of early human use of this site comes in the form just scoot back to 1836. In the course of quarrying, a large gully that now cuts through the ridge between 2 of the stones, human remains were found. And that then takes us to that other evidence, the Pictish symbol stone. The Class 1 carved stone is currently built into the garden wall of Finlarg House. The Ballintomb Pictish stones was found at the Ballintomb farm cottages, being used as a flagstone for a front door. The stone was lifted and placed in its current location. The stone, light grey schist, and consists of 2 symbols, the upper crescent and V-rod, the lower notched rectangle with a Z-rod. The face is now badly weathered. It may be that the stone was originally ploughed up in the vicinity of the standing stones. On the flat, between the ridge and the river, the Meikle Meadows, evidence of hut circles has been noted. This, again, has not been explored, and there's a need for archaeological work. As there seems little evidence from the site, we might base assumptions on evidence from the neighbouring Cairn archaeological project. Here they found evidence of a small rural agricultural centre with hut circles dating to both the 1st and the 3rd centuries and the 9th and 10th centuries. There was evidence of basic ironworking and quern construction, and there's a reconstruction of how they might have been. What the Ballintomb medieval settlement looked like in early Christian era is entirely a matter of conjecture. Part of the importance of this site is due to its location beside the rivers Spey and Dulnan. D-U-L-N-A-N. The I got stuck in later on, I think probably thanks to Ordnance Survey. The earliest transport was by river, and later a ferry carried people and goods across the Spey for centuries before bridges were built. Our earliest map is that of Timothy Pont, and in this 1590 map it shows the ferry and a road, the ferry of Ballintomb or Ferrytown, and linking up with a road up to Muckrach. And down in the corner there we have the first representation of Castle Grant. Until around 1920, a ferryman could be summoned from the boat of Ballyfirth in the parish of Abernethy to cross the Spey to the Ballintomb side. In the mid-1800s, the ferryman was Peter Grant, known as Peter Porter. He was also a forester in Nethy, and is especially remembered for the tree which he refused to cut down because of its shape and size. The tree, mentioned in Forsyth's Shadow of Cairngorm, is still standing, though now dead, shown here with a direct descendant of the ferryman. Ballintomb would seem to have been in the hands of the Grant family since the 13th century. The earliest Grant portraits are of James Grant of Fruchy and his wife, Lady Mary Stuart. An early 17th century rental of the Grant estates includes Ballintomb, Balnatroin, alongside Over and Nether Findlerg, Croft Scalich, Mocrach, Geicht, Cragane, the Croft of Cragane, and Glenbeg. Ballintomb became the rallying place of the Clan Grant. There are references in Fraser's Chiefs of Grant to Ballintomb as the site for levying and reviewing troops and clansmen. In 1651, the Laird was required to help raise an army which might oppose the progress of Cromwell into Scotland. The rendezvous for the Laird's hail, name and friends being at Ballintomb on the 25th of that month. In 1710, the Highland King, Ludovic, Laird of Grant, planned to retire and live in Edinburgh. In an event unique in clan history, he handed over running of the estate to his son, Brigadier General Alexander Grant, who sent instructions to the Clan Grant to gather at Ballintomb. And there is an 18th century account of this event.
Mr. Grant of Grant returned home, and having obtained his father's leave, made all the gentlemen and commons of his name wear whiskers, and make all their plaids and tartan of red and green, and commanded them all to appear before him at Ballintomb, the ordinary place of rendezvous, in that uniform, in kilt and undure arms, which order was complied with. The old laird attended on this occasion with his son, and making a respectable figure, delivered a handsome speech to the men drawn up in full order, telling them that in him now being old, was no longer fit to command them on such expeditions as he and they were wont to be employed in, and that they therefore was to devolve the command of them upon his son, who they saw promised as well, if not better than ever he did, and he therefore expected that they would maintain the same good character with regard to courage and unanimity they bore while he commanded them. Then, addressing himself to his son, he said, "My dear Sandy, I make you this day a very great present, the honour of commanding the Clan Grant, who while I conducted them, though in troublesome times, yet they never misbehaved, so that you have then this day, without spat or blemish, I hope and beg you will use them as well as I did, in supporting their public and private interests, agreeable to the laws of liberty and probity, as they are now happily established in our lands. God bless you all.
The laird was responsible for law and order on his estate. Justice was administered by the laird or his bailies at the regality courts, which were held at several places in Strathspey, but most often at Ballintomb, which was also a place of punishment and execution. The Ballintomb courts were held on a large, man-made, grass-grown mound situated some 200 metres east of the Ballintomb farmsteading. The mound is crossed from northeast to southwest, northwest to southeast, by two deep trenches. This is the mysterious cross of Ballintomb, whose origins are unknown. It's not shown on maps, and there are no oral traditions as to its purpose. The regality court, however, would assemble there here to dispense justice, and a gallows was also in the vicinity. 5 of the court books of the regality, covering the period from 1690 to 1729, are still extant, and from these we can learn much of crime and punishment in those far-off days. Some of the punishments may seem both cruel and harsh.
For example, and I quote, "The miscreant might be bound to the gallows, stripped and scourged." One account of Patrick Bain and his daughter from before 1700 graphically describes this. Convicted of theft, he was taken to the gallows foot upon the moor of Ballintomb and tied thereto by the executioner with hemp cords, and his body made naked from the belt upward, and to be scourged by the said executioner with a scourge by laying upon his body 24 stripes to the fusion of his blood, and then be loused and let go. His daughter was then to be given the same gruesome treatment. Others, on conviction, may possibly have been banished from the local area, or even from the country of Strathspey, and from all countries of Scotland be north the Toon of Perth, never to return or reside, travel or have any intercourse in the said places in time coming, under pain of death. Stealing firewood and poaching, whether deer or rabbits, might result in a fine. For the theft of the sock of a plough, a lad of 17 was sentenced to have his lug nailed with an iron nail to an post, and to stand there for the space of an hour without motions, and then allows him to break the grip without drawing of the nail. Capital punishment was frequently inflicted. On one occasion, 2 prisoners for housebreaking and stealing cheese were condemned to be brought to the Gallow Hill of Ballintomb, and betwixt 2 and 4 hours in the afternoon to be both hanged upon the gallows by the neck by the hand of the executioner till they be dead.
Some of the punishments may seem both cruel and harsh. Since medieval times, there's been a market and a significant fair on this site between the rivers and adjacent to roads. Figget Fair was originally held close to Figget's Well, beside an inn, and named, of course, after St. Figget, patron saint of the area. This later, because of the need for a better and more open site, was moved. The story told over 100 years ago by old Mr. Grant of Ballyfirth was that, long ago, 2 of the heads of Douglas were arguing as to the advisability of shifting the market site. The son of one was handling a heavy stone used at the market to try your strength. The other, Davachman, said, "I'll consent to let the market go as far west as your son can carry that stone." The lad carried it past Gaich to Ballintomb. The last fair at Ballintomb was held on the first Friday of June, old style, in 1765, prior to being moved to Grantown in 1766. And that's allegedly Figget's stone in the graveyard at Inverallen. There's a story from the supplement of 11th June 1881 of a feud, a murder and retribution connecting the fair, the inn and the courts in the days of Sir Ludovic.
At a sale held somewhere to the west of Inverallen, a man named Grant, from the east in the direction of Castle Grant, bought some sheep. On the way homewards, he had to pass some figgets where the Kirlintra burn meets the Spey, whose shrine had then reached the last stage of sanctity and become transformed into an alehouse. Here, Grant met a man from the neighbourhood of Haich, named Alan Cameron, better known as Cameron Moore, from a farm in Rothimarcus, held by the turbulent and unruly family to which he belonged. It is probable that they were drinking together within the alehouse. At any rate, they quarrelled fiercely before they separated. Grant to pursue his journey homeward with his sheep. Rage and anger, usually allayed by reflection, appear to have increased in the breast of Cameron, for impelled by them, he pursued Grant and come upon him beside the old Porter Lodge well, now very generally known as Robbie MacDonald's well. Here he attacked and killed Grant with a cudgel. Fearful of the consequence of his crime, he fled through Dulig, as one narrator had it, pursued by a gentleman in silk stockings. One of the pursuer's stockings got torn and destroyed in a reckless pursuit which proved futile, for the murderer escaped from Strathspey and became a soldier. A reward was, however, offered for the capture and conviction of Cameron, but the isolated condition of communities in those days rendered it extremely unlikely that the reward would be earned. Yet it chanced that in this case the proverb, "murder will out," verified itself. The gentleman who pursued the murderer through the Dulig had a male servant to whom he gave the torn stockings, out of which he had a purse made. This servant ultimately became a soldier and departed to Ireland, where to join his regiment. Some time after, he is sitting in the mess room in close confab with a comrade, who we presume must have hailed from Strathspey. The silk purse remains of the stockings he held in his hand while he narrates the story of the murder and the chase in which they were torn, which he concludes by expressing a strongly felt wish for an opportunity to bring the villain to justice. His comrade assures him that next day he will be able to point out this man to him in the ranks, which he did, and the servant walked up to Cameron, who now went under an assumed name, and saluted him by that which he had abandoned. He started astonished at the sound, which doubtless was all the more ominous as voiced by the accents of Strathspey. He was immediately reported, sent home for trial, tried, probably at Inverness, or under the lingering feudal authority of Sir Ludwig Grant. Condemned, and as the date of his execution drew nearer, taken to the jail of Cromdale, whence he was led here on the fatal morning, guarded by two men, one in front and one behind, each holding the end of a rope tied around his waist. The name of one of those conductors tradition has preserved. It was Mackintosh, better known as Robbie Moore. He was then sheriff's officer, and we believe his memory is embalmed in the Gaelic verse of a loyal bard of his own day. Crossing the Kirkton burn with their prisoner, Robbie gave his end of the rope a tug, which made the prisoner stagger in the water, an act he resented by sharply remarking that "I'm not your dog to you yet." Arrived at the place of execution, where Sir Ludwig Grant was in attendance to see the sentence carried out. When the noose had been adjusted, the culprit was asked if he had anything to say or confess. "All I have to say is, may everyone get the reward of his sins." "Knock him off," rejoined Sir Ludwig Grant, between two mouthfuls of the lunch he was consuming. He has confessed enough, and the fatal drop fell, but it would seem that the hangman was not an adept in his craft, for it was not until the third or fourth essay that he succeeded in making good his work. It is said that Cameron's mother was spinning flax but a short distance from the scene of execution, ignorant of the fate that was befalling her son.
There's little visible evidence of old Ballintomb. An 1868 Victorian document records the farm buildings would appear to have been dated back to the 17th century at least. It was described as once a large farmsteading now attached to the farm of Ballintomb. The houses are unoccupied and have been in ruins for a length of time. The present occupier of Ballintomb, Mr. Stewart, says he will have them taken away, probably next year, and the ground occupied by them turned into arable ground. The 1868 map shows a farmstead comprising of 3 unroofed buildings, one of which is arranged around 3 sides of a courtyard. The map also shows the site of the ferry. Which you can see down here. Through time, various works have been carried out to improve the agriculture of the area. The loch or moss on the north side of the ridge was drained almost 200 years ago by virtue of a big cut dug through the natural dip in the ridge. To further alleviate flooding, Sir James Grant commenced a drainage scheme in the 1790s. Because of the slow flow of Spey, as there is little drop for miles, an artificial channel was created to cut off the great loop with a Hernach on the other side, to take the water away from the Culleria fields further upstream and ease flooding. This was cut with a barrow and shovel, but aborted as apparently it was seen as unsuccessful and not finished. And there's the cut. The remains of 2 kilns are visible, set side by side into a west-southwest facing slope some 320 metres southwest of Ballintomb farmsteading. The pots are largely filled with rubble and soil. One measures about 2.5 metres in diameter and at least 0.8 in depth. The other measures 1.7 metres in diameter and at least 0.5 metres in depth. In both cases, the position of the draw hole was obscured by dense broom on the date of that visit. Ballintomb Distillery was situated at Old Ballintomb. It appears to date back to around 1824, making it one of the first licensed distilleries in Scotland, along with Balmenach and Dalvey, following the Excise Act of 1823. It was actively distilling for several decades. The first owners, cited by Moss and Hume, were Gordon and Rose, 1825-6, followed by James Rose, 1827-9, Alexander Rose, 1829-31, and James Gordon, 1831-7. Donald Gordon's name appears in 1852. On the 15th of November, 1851, he had written to William Gillespie Bryson, Factor Strathspey, about Ballintomb Distillery. On the 30th of May 1853, Sweet and Gordon wrote from a Hernach to the Laird of Seafield, that was Francis William, seeking assistance and suggesting that he support the proposal made by Mrs. Gordon of Ballintomb to move the distillery to a Hernach, which was near the public road, near water, and an inexhaustible moss. He wrote, Mrs. Gordon Ballintomb has made a proposal to me of taking the distillery and removing it to a Hernach. This, I am perfectly satisfied, would place me in a position capable of continued improvement of the farm. No doubt a good deal of additional buildings will be required. Earl Francis William, however, was within a few weeks of his death, and this proposal seems not to have come to anything. Mrs. Anne Gordon, whose name appears as the owner in 1860, was a relative of the factor Captain John Grant of Congash and William Grant Stewart, who ran distillery at Dalvey. It seems that to be connected is a very useful attribute if you're building a distillery. The final name in the list was John Stuart Smith. The 1861 census shows the 59-year-old Anne Gordon as distiller, maltster, and farmer. Also, we have John Cumming, maltman, and Roderick McIntosh, brewer. The distillery also received several mentions in local directories, such as Slater's and Pickett's, through into the 1860s. It's mentioned in Watson's Morayshire Described, printed in 1868, but on the first edition Ordnance Survey map of that year, it's shown as an empty building, which may indicate that it was around that time that it ceased business. It does suggest, however, that it was housed in the old Ballintomb farmsteadings. More modern transport developments are also relevant to the history of this site. The railway, which cuts through the site, was opened in 1863, with Broomhill and Grantown West stations serving the Dolman community. This line, of course, is again in the news. The old and new A95 marks the boundary of the site. It was originally Grant's Road to Aviemore, a carriage road built for Sir Ludovic Grant of Grant in the 1730s and 40s to link Castle Grant with the Wade Road at Aviemore, and later adopted as a military road. During the last half of the 19th century, it's recorded that the stretch of road from Dolman Bridge to Grantown was looked after by one old man, whose implements were a wheelbarrow, pickaxe and shovel, though he was assisted by the men who broke stones at the roadside on off days in winter. To the children of the neighbourhood, the roadman was known as Flegg, a nickname he may have got from his own threatening aspect, or perhaps from that of his Dandy Dinmont terrier, which kept guard over his coat and dinner pail. As has been the way through time, travel routes have influenced the position of settlements. Ballintomb was to be the site of the first planned town in Strathspey, New Grantown, using the dry ridge in the angle between the rivers, the site of the fair and beside the rallying place of the clan. This was the idea some 2 years before 1765, but in the first weeks of that year, James Grant changed his mind. The military road from Aviemore ran beyond boggy ground on the other side of the ridge. A law of the old Scots Parliament said that you could move a road some 200 ells from its site without great legal difficulties. As the distance, however, was greater than that, the construction of diverting the roads and the adjoining and rejoining the old route was very great, so he planned to jam his new town in between two military roads, the one from Braemar to Fort George and the one from Aviemore. The lands of Ballintomb, therefore, have a long and rich history. There are many mysteries and unanswered questions. What are the origins of the cross of Ballintomb? Whose graves are those on the hillside? Are there more? Who erected those standing stones and why? What is the significance of the markings on the Ballintomb stone? Yet they hold the key to a great many stories and unique events. Maybe partly forgotten lands, but lands nevertheless of great potential. Return of the railway, for instance, and there's a whisper too of a new Ballintomb distillery. As to whether it is Strathspey's most historic site, you must decide. Thank you. Now, no use asking me any questions, because that's all I know. It's all written here. Well, almost all. And I've gathered that from many sources, and I'm deeply indebted to all sorts of people who have supplied information and photographs and helped put the whole presentation together. And of course, thanks to those who come to listen to it. But comments and information, or indeed questions, because somebody might be able to answer them.
I've got a very simple one, Bill. It's not
We do have.
It's really.
Are you allowed to, can people hear? Or do we need a microphone again?
Yeah. Just how do we get to it? Because I've looked on the map. I've often wanted to go there, but didn't really want to trespass. across farmers' fields. Well, I know you've got right of access, but what's the best way in?
Yes, you do need permission. Perhaps John, you can talk about how best to get in there.
If you start at Growlan, the car park right at Old Growlan Cemetery, and walk along the spray past the new distillery, there's a good footpath. And then that peters out, well, you just follow the line of the fishing huts along the spray, and you come to a field, traverse the field, and you'll come to a small plantation with a fence, but there's a fragile wooden stile. This is again on the banks of the spray. You go over the stile, there's a path through the plantation parallel to the river, and then you'll come to a ditch within sight of the mound, and there's a rickety plank over the ditch. Once you're over that, you walk, turn right, and you walk up towards the cross of Ballintomb. Yeah, go back, Bill.
Oh, sorry.
You go back. Yeah, so when you see the spey there, so you follow the banks of the spey from the Growlan churchyard, and just to the left there, just there's a ditch, and there's a plank across the ditch, or if you walk up the far away bank from where we're looking at it, the ditch levels off, and you can actually cross. And the first thing you'll come to is the cross of Ballintomb. And then once you go beyond that, you're onto the sort of plateau, and you'll see the stones spaced out. One of the stones is actually, there's two there, sorry, go back, Bill.
Oh.
Yeah, so there's something. So there's two stones there, there's one erect, one lying down, and walking towards the sun, there's another stone lying on its side. That's looking towards Skye of Ker, Dublin Bridge. If you're looking in the other direction, there's one solitary stone standing not far from those two, and then there's another stone that's actually in the plantation. So the alternative way is to go to Ballintomb Farm and ask permission, and it's just walk right across the field. There's not usually a crop in them, but sometimes sheep. So yeah, if you go off the road, the red line, go down to Ballintomb Farm, and just ask permission there, and you can walk across those fields directly to it.
There's a rough farm track, I think.
Yeah, you can walk along the railway line.
Someone can keep me right.
Usually there's no crops in those fields. So yeah, going back to what I was saying earlier, you go to the top right, you just follow the river Spey upstream. Go back to that map.
Sorry.
Yeah, follow the Spey. That finger, that peninsula there that's sticking out, that black line, that's a cut that they dug in the 1790s. That line there. And if you walk along that cut to there, there's a sort of a dam which you didn't breach, otherwise the Spey would have flowed through there, cutting off that spit of land. And then you come to the plantation there, and you cross the fence, there's a stile, and in the summer it's full of bracken, but there's a path that takes you to that ditch. So I'd walk up the ditch to there, and there's a cross mark, you can see the little dots. That's the cross there. So walk along the bank. As I say, there's a plank over the ditch there, but you can walk up and then around the ditch to the cross and then over to the stones. So there's the stones there, and one in the plantation.
Thank you.
Not the easiest. Oh,
I was interested in, I think you call it the frigate stone in
Yes.
the graveyard at Inverallen, the old graveyard. I always thought it was called the priest stone.
yes.
There's a cross on both sides of it. The cross on the north side is very noticeable, but the one on the south side is almost worn away by the weather and sun.
It's certainly not terribly clear, but obviously the priest and frigate have been
Right, yeah.
joined.
Yeah.
But yes, the priest stone, and that's relatively easy to find. It's more or less in the middle of the graveyard.
It's quite difficult to locate.
Yes, you just got to go
Yeah.
searching.
If anybody wants to I can show them where it is if anybody's interested. Just get in touch.
There we go. Any other comments or thoughts at the moment?
The cross mentioned is very reminiscent of an Iron Age, well-known Iron Age symbol, very similar to the saltire used on the Scottish flag, of course, that is labelled St Andrews but may well go back to pagan times and is known as the Wheel of Life symbol. Whether that's of any use as a colloquial association, I have no idea. It may indicate some age to that device, I don't know.
And what indeed is underneath that great big lump? You know, is that yet another burial site? Because it's not natural. Okay. Thoughts? In which case, there's probably lots of, as usually happens, there's lots of discussion as we tidy up and so on. But just to let you know that our next month's meeting it's a very special one because it's a wonderful piece of local research done by Rob there, and we're very excited to hear the results of this. It's the third Friday in February, when somebody will tell me the date of that. 17th, thank you very much. So back here, 17th of February. The museum have got various events coming up, which somebody perhaps can let us know about. Anyone got the museum calendar in their head?
There's a guitar concert on the 20th.
Steve, sorry?
There's a guitar concert on the Friday the 24th.
Of this month? No, it's not. The 24th. 24th's gone, isn't it? Yes, next month, the 24th of February. Thank you. And in which case, once again, thank you all so much for coming. I note that it's still not quite 12 o'clock, but then it was not quite 12 o'clock when we started. So time when you're talking about thousands of years is infinitesimal. So once again, thanks very much.
I'd like to just thank the speakers, Bill and John, for a wonderful talk, very revealing, and they've added considerably, I think, to the body of knowledge about that site, and made it very interesting and dramatic as well. So thank you both very much indeed for that.
And thanks to our audience.
Well, can I just say one last
Yes,
thing?
please do.
I was brought up at Ballintomb Farm, and when I was there was a wood called the crow wood right beside the stones. I don't know if that was relevant to the site, but we used to freak ourselves out by going over there and playing around the stones and hearing the crows. Just thought I'd mention it.
It all adds to the every little piece is a piece in the jigsaw, and it's a never-ending jigsaw. And when we find the corner pieces and the edge pieces, we'll be well on the way to sorting it. So yes, thanks very much indeed, and as I say, thanks to Dave Calder who's set up all of this, and whose wizardry will turn it into a YouTube film, which will be on our website in a month or so's time.